Hey there, my fellow music lovers. Welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for dropping by and taking time out of your day to watch this video. In this video, I'm going to be giving a shout out to Robert Plant. He just turned 70 years old this past week. Can you believe it? Yeah, he was born on August the 20th, 1948. And of course, I'm sure all of you know, the former lead singer of one of the biggest, best bands in the world, Led Zeppelin, who are, going to be celebrating 50 years themselves next year. Their first album came out in 1969. But with Robert Plant, I've been following him as a solo artist ever since he started that in 1982. Of course, Led Zeppelin, they disbanded in 1980 after their drummer John Bonham passed away. And, Robert Plant wasn't even sure if he wanted to even get back into music. He thought about maybe becoming a teacher, but he was persuaded and, decided to give it a shot. And in 1982 put out his very first solo album, which remains my favorite of all of his solo albums, Pictures at 11. I just love every single song on that one, and I just think that Robert Plant is a very forward-moving, very forward-thinking artist. He's not one of these guys that likes to dwell on the past, likes to lean on the past, and we're going to see more of what I'm talking about here because I picked out 5 tall, cool ones about Robert Plant. 5 things about his solo career that have impressed me that I really have enjoyed. And the first one is that he recruited Phil Collins to kind of help him get started with his first couple of solo albums. Phil Collins not only played drums on his first 2 solo albums, but he was also there to kind of direct the whole process. Robert Plant was coming out of Zeppelin, where he was part of a machine. He didn't call all the shots. Everything was not left up to him. And now that he's gone solo, he is basically in charge of every aspect of everything. And plus, he's also still very hurt by the death of his friend, John Bonham. And so he needed direction. And Phil Collins, who had been, working in Genesis and he was coming into his own as a songwriter and kind of more of an equal strength, Tony and Mike in that band, he was able to provide Robert Plant with a lot of direction, and he helped to shape the solo band. He was almost like the director of things. He was making sure that people were showing up on time and doing what they had to do. He kind of took a burden off of Robert Plant. And the second tall, cool one about Robert Plant was that he didn't lean on Led Zeppelin to get him going when he went out live. As a matter of fact, he avoided playing Led Zeppelin live for many, many years. He didn't want to just be known as the guy from Zeppelin. He wanted to build up a solo catalog that was strong and that people liked him for what he was doing and not for what he did. And so he went out, actually, I think he played a couple of tours where he didn't play any Zeppelin at all. It was just solo stuff. He didn't play any of the Zepp until the 1988 Now and Zen tour. So that was about 8 years that he went without playing Zeppelin. So think of the balls that he had. Look at what he had with Zeppelin and all those songs. He could have been doing Stairway every night. He would have been, pleasing fans left and right. And it also just goes to show you how Robert Plant didn't need Zeppelin right after he left them. So imagine how he feels now. After all these years, people are wanting him to get back with Zeppelin. Is he going to do it? How come he doesn't do it? You have to keep in mind that Robert Plant has always tried to kind of distance himself from the nostalgia of the whole Led Zeppelin thing. And so finally, when he does the Now and Zen tour, he decides to play Zeppelin. And that's actually the first tour where I got to see Robert Plant. And I remember it like it was yesterday going to see him. And he was just a great performer. And he had a really good live band. That's one of the great things about Plant, too, is that he always puts out a really good live band and he always changes it up. He'll play with some guys for a few years and then he'll get a whole new group of guys, a whole new sound. So I got to give him credit for that. Now, number 3 on my list of tall, cool ones for Robert Plant as a solo artist is going to be his collaborations with Jimmy Page here and there throughout the years. Just because Robert Plant left Zeppelin behind did not mean that he never wanted to work with Jimmy Page again. He certainly did. One of the first things that he did was work with him in this little side project called the Honey Drippers. You may recall they had this hit called The Sea of Love, and it was Jimmy Page who laid down the guitar solo on that track. And then also Jimmy Page played with Plant on his 1988 solo album Now and Zen. That was Page doing the solo on the hit Heaven Knows and Tall Cool One. And also Robert Plant played on Jimmy Page's solo album, actually wrote a song with him and sang it called The Only One. That was from the album Outrider, which was a really good Jimmy Page album, I thought. And I was hoping that Jimmy Page would do more solo albums, but that's the last one that he's done, although he has worked with some other artists like Paul Rodgers and David Coverdale. But I always liked that track, The Only One. As a matter of fact, I've got a playlist going, a lot of the songs I'm talking about here and some others I'm going to put down below, so be sure to check that out. And then, of course, around 1994, Page and Plant actually went on tour, and they did an album called Walking into Clarksdale. And it was kind of like a rough draft of what Zeppelin could have been probably in the mid-90s. But I thought that their live shows between 94 and 96 or so were really, really good. And I'm going to put a link to some of that down below. They had a really good band, particularly the drummer Michael Lee, who sadly passed away some time ago. He was one of the best drummers I've ever seen, brought a lot of life to those shows. And they also did this concert called Unleaded, which was aired on MTV, was put out on DVD, where they kind of give the Zeppelin songs a bit of a Middle Eastern kind of a vibe. I remember liking what they did with Kashmir, one of the best versions of that song. I really was never a big fan of the song Kashmir. I always thought it was just a little bit kind of bland. I mean, it was kind of cool, but it just kind of went on. It didn't really go through a lot of changes. When they did the unleaded version with the Middle Eastern instrumentation and the orchestra, it really brought that song to life and gave it a lot of flavor. So I'm going to put a link to that down below, so you got to check that out. Now, number 4 on my list of tall cool ones from Robert Plant's solo career has got to be his collaboration with Alison Krauss and their album Raising Sand. When I first heard that he was getting together with Alison Krauss and doing a duets kind of album, it really piqued my interest because, he had never done anything like this before. Kind of gets back to what I was saying, very forward thinking, doing different things, doing an album with a female singer, particularly one that kind of comes from bluegrass or alternative country, whatever you want to call her. That was just like a wow kind of thing. And I remember when I first heard the album, I loved it. And I think that that album, for the most part, is really, really strong. And they didn't just sing like, every other verse or anything, like, go back and forth and do a pure duets kind of album. There were some songs like with Fortune Teller, where Robert Plant is singing the lead vocal, and then you can hear Alison Krauss kind of coming in with this textural, almost like it could have been a keyboard, but they used her voice to kind of drift in and out of the song, there's many examples of that throughout the album where vocals are used in a textural way, and not strictly in a just flat-out duet kind of way, and I really appreciated that. Got to check the album out, Raising Sand with Alison Krauss. They did try to do a second album, but Robert Plant just wasn't feeling it, so they kind of aborted it. And I wouldn't be shocked if they got back together at some point and did something again. And finally, number 5 on my list of tall, cool ones for Robert Plant has got to be when he finally decided to get back together one more time, maybe one last time, with Led Zeppelin for a reunion in 2007. And they did it right this time, because the previous reunions that Zeppelin has had have, they've been kind of underwhelming. Let's just put it that way. The first one, Live Aid in 1985, was a disaster. Then they did another one like around 88 for Atlantic Records, and Jimmy Page just wasn't very, very sharp. Jason Bonham was great, but he was very, very young. Now in 2007, everybody was on point. It was a great, great show. It almost sounded like they never went away, and you kind of hoped that they did more shows. But that was it for Robert Plant. You know, he wanted to dip his toe back in the water, and that was it. You know, he didn't want to keep on going there. They threw a lot of money at him. I mean, Robert Plant was getting offers, I think I've heard, up to like $200 million, and he declined. And it wasn't about the money. You know, Robert Plant, as I have said before, he's moving forward, you know, and it's not like he doesn't play Zeppelin. He doesn't want to play Zeppelin. He plays Zeppelin in his solo shows that he's doing now. It's just that he kind of, he reinvents them. You know, Robert Plant over the past number of years has been getting into this territory that's kind of like, I don't know what you want to call it, country, blues, maybe a little jazz, maybe a little bit of world music, some rock, and I don't know, some psychedelic. He's in a very eclectic kind of place. And so the Zeppelin that he does is kind of thrown into that blender. And he'd rather do the Zeppelin that way than try to be faithful to the old albums or anything and do it as Zeppelin. So that just speaks to Robert Plant. That's always been the way that he's operated. He doesn't want to look back for too long a period of time. He wants to stay current and do things the way he wants to, and he wants to do them differently than he did it on the last album or the last tour. And he may even want to work with some different people. That's just the way that Plant is. So there's also speculation that maybe next year for the 50th for Led Zeppelin that they might get back together again. It's really hard to say. It wouldn't shock me if it went either way. If they never played again live or if they did another one-off show, we'll have to see. We shall see. But anyway, what do you think? What do you think about Robert Plant hitting 70? What do you think about these tall, cool ones? Do you have one? Put it down below. Be sure to check out the playlist that I've got for you on this video. Give this one a thumbs up if you like it. Hit the subscribe button too, and I'll be back with another video.